There we go. 3, 2, 1. Hi guys. Thank you for joining us today for the BuytoLet ESPC event. I'll just start with some introductions. I'm going to go around my screen in the way I see everyone. So my name is Will. I work for the ESPC in the marketing department. We're joined by Graham Keith from Blackadder's, who's a solicitor. We've got Peter McGregor from ESPC Mortgages, and we've also got Nikki Lloyd from ESPC Lettings. So thanks for joining us today. We're going to be taking your questions. So we've had some pre-submitted ones, and we'll also be doing a live Q&A as well. So we're going to start with a kind of introduction from Nikki, who's going to talk about kind of the latest market trends and some figures behind them. And then once Nikki's done her introduction, we'll then move on to the pre-submitted questions. So Nikki, if you want to go ahead now.
Yeah, sure. So thanks very much, Will, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So just to kind of into the event, I guess a little bit of what's been happening in the last kind of year. Certainly nobody predicted what has happened, but good news certainly is that the property market remained fairly resilient, and we were able to kind of continue normally. We were one of the first industries to resume after the initial lockdown, and fortunately we've been able to operate fully since that. So albeit with new processes and new safety measures in place, but certainly we've been able to facilitate property viewings, reservations and home moves since the market opened. And fortunately, we've not had any changes in that too much, so that we have been continuing to operate. And I'm happy to say that business has been brisk. So for the first time this year, we have sufficient data recently to being able to provide details of average purchase prices, average rentals and average yields across Edinburgh. And I can go into those a little bit later. What I would say is that overall, the Edinburgh rental market has remained steady. Rents have been fluctuant compared to this time last year. Things are taking a little bit longer to let them normal, but we're thinking that's really just due to changes in industry and our processes rather than demand. So I would say, amongst a lot of kind of doom and gloom, it's an industry which is being able to continue to grow. It's still a good investment opportunity is what we would think just now. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nikki. So yeah, what we're going to do is now I'm going to move on to the pre-submitted questions. If you do have any questions throughout, you can submit them in the Q&A box, which you should be able to see. So just throughout the event, just whenever one comes to your mind, just pop them in there. And after we've done the pre-submitted questions, we'll move on to the live ones. So any questions you guys have put in, we will answer them then. So the first question is for Graham. And it is there a compulsory 3% tax on all buy-to-let properties in Edinburgh?
Thanks, Will. The question, I assume, is directed more at the additional dwelling supplement, or second home tax, as you may know it. The answer is probably almost certainly yes, but a couple of things just to mention. In Scotland, when you buy a property, you have to pay land and buildings transaction tax, and also if on the day you complete the purchase of the new property, you will own more than one property, you also have to pay additional dwelling supplement. So at present, additional dwelling supplement is charged at 4% of the entire purchase price. When it was initially introduced, it was 3%, and I believe it is still 3% down south. But in Scotland, since January 2019, it's been charged at 4%. The other thing to mention is that there was, of course, a holiday, if you can call it that, from land and buildings transaction tax, which was announced earlier in the summer by the Scottish Government in response to the situation we find ourselves in. That holiday relates only to the land and buildings transaction tax, the standard tax that everyone has to pay. So at the moment, the threshold has been raised to £250,000, and it is expected when that holiday comes to an end at the end of March, that will lower back down to 145,000. But the additional dwelling supplement is unaffected, you will still have to pay additional dwelling supplement on a second home at the rate of 4%.
Thank you very much. So the next question is for Nikki, and it is, how is the rental market performing in Edinburgh at the moment? We had lots of questions like this, so I'll pass across to Nikki.
So I guess just as I mentioned in the intro, things have been pretty rosy. They've been pretty healthy in terms of the market. This is probably traditionally a quieter time of year, and we have experienced things quieting down. But anything can happen, as we've learned, and there is still plenty of movement in the market. Have some figures and some stats, which I know always goes down well, just to kind of give an indication as what's been happening in the market. And these figures are kind of the quarter of the year, so they are really kind of hot off the press. What I've got here is details of some average rent. So at the moment, an average rent for a one bed is 804 a month. That's actually down year on year, but just by 0.7%. The average rent on a two bed is 1,042. That again is down slightly by 1.1%. The average rent on a three bedroom is £1,459, and that's down again a little bit by 1.4. So rents are down from where we were this time last year, but it's worth considering that this time last year rents were at an all-time high. So we had never seen rents as high as we had this time last year. So actually what's happening is really rents just kind of settling down to a little bit more realistic figures. So it's certainly not plummeting down and nothing for concern. In terms of the time to let, so one bedroom is taking 38 days to let, two bedrooms are taking 45 days to let, and they're both up 8 days on where we would have been normally at this time of year. Three beds take the longest to let, they're 56 days, and that's up 17 days. Yeah, things are taking longer to let. It is likely due to processes, physical viewings, group viewings, lots of things have changed. Viewings, we've moved to doing virtual viewings, video tours. There are longer void periods in between tenancies to make sure that we keep properties safely, to make sure that they can be checked. So the process takes longer, and I wouldn't necessarily be concerned that the length of things taken to rent is because of the lack of demand. The other figure that I have is yields, and this gives an indication the areas in Edinburgh are performing the best at the moment. So for one bedrooms, the best performing in terms of yield is EH16. So that kind of covers Liberton, Prestonfield, Craigmillar, that kind of side of town, and you can expect a yield of 7.4%. Another good performing area for one bedrooms is EH14, which is really all the way from Slateford or Balerno, and that offers 5.9%. And then for two bedrooms, we're finding the best area is EH18, so maybe Gilmerton, Morton Hall, that kind of area, which offers 6.3%. And EH12, so that's kind of Castorf, Murrayfield, and that's offering 5.4%. So those are the best performing areas. And what we're finding is areas still have relatively competitive purchase prices. So you're being able to purchase the property for a good price because you maybe haven't stretched your purchase price compared to the rent. So certainly I would say that those are the hot areas at the moment.
Thank you very much, Nikki. So next question is for Nikki as well, and this is quite a current one. What can landlords do to protect themselves from tenants who can't pay rent due to COVID?
So unsurprisingly, this is a common question, and some that can cause a lot of concern for landlords. COVID affected landlords and tenants alike, and people have been more of their finances than ever before. What happened certainly for us is we encouraged landlords and tenants to have communication and dialogue to discuss if they were having problems paying their rent. In a lot of instances, some landlords went with offering rental holidays, some went with reducing rents for a set period of time, but certainly things were discussed. What we found in all of those cases is when rent levels returned to normal, without fail, 100% they did, and everything was paid on time. So it really paid off to have that chat, maybe just take a rent for a bit of time rather than allowing your tenant to fall into arrears. There are also mortgage holidays landlords are able to apply for, and tenants could apply for universal credit. Unfortunately, if your tenant is unable or unwilling to pay rent, then there's not much that can be done about that. There isn't any scheme or government or recourse that can get that money back in the short term. What you can do is you can serve notice, and you still can do that. So once your tenant has owed some rent for at least 3 months, you can serve notice. The notice periods have changed. So from April until initially September, that period has now been extended until the end of March. These periods have changed. This has been changed by legislation to avoid homelessness, I guess is really what they would have said. But what you will find now is if your tenant is in arrears and you want to serve notice, the notice period is now 6 months. It's actually 6 months, quite a lot of the kind of grounds. So it's worthwhile checking and to see where you're at and what kind of grounds you would have. But what I would say is, just enter into a conversation with the tenants and see if you can work something out.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you, Nikki. So the next question is for Peter. What criteria do lenders look for in buy-to-let mortgages?
Yeah, so typically across the board, pretty much all lenders have broadly the same criteria, lending criteria. First one is the deposit. They're generally speaking looking for a 25% deposit. And it's important to stress it's 25% of the valuation of the property and not the price you pay. So if you buy a property valued very, very simple, if you buy a property valued at 100,000 and you pay 110,000 for that property, you're going to need 35,000, which is 25% of the valuation for your deposit from the lender, and the 10,000 more than the valuation that you paid for it. So deposit 25%. Next thing, most lenders are looking for the applicant to have an income. Most lenders are generally looking for a minimum of 25,000. Some are looking for a minimum of 30,000. There are one or two specialised buy-to-let lenders, however, that will lend if you have an income. It doesn't necessarily have to be a minimum as long as you've got an income. The majority of lenders also want you to have your own home, so a residential property that you live in rather than a rented property. That again is pretty much across the board. Rental income, there's the way most buy-to-let mortgages are worked out is on the basis of the expected or anticipated rental income. And the lenders all have different various calculators that they use to calculate this. The rental income will be decided or will be judged, if you like, by the surveyor, and the surveyor will be appointed by whichever lender you go to. Unfortunately, the lenders no longer take the home reports when you're doing a buy-to-let mortgage. They will always appoint their own surveyor, and that surveyor will determine what the rental income is. The rental income that the surveyor says he anticipates the flat or the property can get. There's then all sorts of different various ways that lenders will work it out. What I would say though is in Edinburgh, if you're buying in the Edinburgh district, pretty much all of the, and certainly given the figures that Nikki's just given us, given the rental incomes that are being attained at the moment, these should all pretty much be enough to cover most lenders' criteria in and around Edinburgh. And then the other thing, of course, is the property. The property has to be habitable, immediately lettable, so it's got to be in a fit state, a fit condition to go. And also, now more prevalent is the minimum energy performance certificate, which has to be at a grade E or above for buy-to-let properties. It's a little known fact of that one, but that is becoming more prevalent. So just a quick recap then: the deposit, 25%, have an income, ideally a minimum income, own your own home. The rental income, as I say, in and around Edinburgh should be okay, but it will be determined by the surveyor, and they don't take home reports into account. And the property has to be immediately habitable and have a minimum energy performance certificate of an E or above.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks very much, Peter. So I've got another one for you there, Peter. Can first-time buyers get a buy-to-let mortgage?
Yeah, so as I've just outlined there previously, pretty much most lenders want you to be living in your own residential property. That said, and I did check this yesterday, there are currently 2 high street lenders that will lend to first-time buyer, first-time landlords, subject to A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. The best advice there is always use a broker because they can cut straight to the chase for you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you, Peter. So next question is for Graham. Does paying cash get you a better price on the property?
Typical lawyer's answer, yes, but maybe no. Paying cash can sometimes make the difference if you are offering for a property when there's a closing date and there are multiple potential buyers. The seller may regard your offer as being better, even if the price you're offering is slightly lower than one of the other interested parties. And the reason for that, the higher offer may be subject to the sale of an existing property or maybe subject to a mortgage application being approved. So the fact that you as a cash buyer have the funds available immediately does mean that you are in a very uncomplicated situation. And if the seller is if their motivation is more to ensure that the sale does complete promptly and without any hiccups or what have you, then they may be inclined to accept your offer. So it certainly can, give you an advantage when you're offering for a property, but it doesn't necessarily always guarantee that that would be the case.
Thank you very much. Okay, next one is for Nikki. What are the key benefits of using an agency to manage your property?
Cool, thanks. So the main benefit, I guess, is that it offers you peace of mind. So whilst the financial cost may be significant to some people, really the peace of mind should outweigh any financial costs. Stricter rules. Obviously, things have changed in terms of kind of how we process things now during COVID. As I mentioned previously, there's legislation about notice periods. Things are constantly changing in this industry, and by using a trusted agent, you can ensure your property, your tenant, everything is protected and being done correctly. So the benefit really is that you can have that peace of mind. It also takes up quite a lot of time managing a property. So unless you find yourself with a lot of time on your hands, using an agent who will do everything for you, from advising, viewings, drawing up the leases, maintenance, inspections, deposits, they will do everything for you. So you can be as hands off. It's also worth wondering, this is a business transaction, and sometimes it's just that little bit better for the owner of the property maybe to step back, treat it as a business action, and let the professionals handle it and make sure everything is being done correctly, and essentially, to give them peace of mind.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next one is for you as well. So where is there more interest from tenants, in fully or part furnished properties? And is it and are they looking for individual rooms or full flats?
So I guess traditionally, most rental properties had been unfurnished, but we are seeing that shift slightly and unfurnished becoming more popular, especially as larger properties are being rented and families are looking to rent properties. So they're likely to have their own furniture. So unfurnished is starting to become more popular for sure. Part furnished can be a little bit cloudy as to what you should and shouldn't leave. So the options really, I would say, are either furnished or unfurnished. If offering a property unfurnished, people would expect white goods, window dressings, and light fitting, and that's really all that you would need to leave. There is very little difference in terms of the rent that they can achieve. It's more about desirability than kind of figures, if you like, when it comes to furnished or unfurnished. So really, whatever works best for you as a landlord. If you have an empty property with no furniture, then the cost of going out and furnishing that property is probably likely to be more than the difference would be in rent. So kind of whatever works. Leases that people sign are exactly the same. So the grounds for serving notice are the same, whether that your property's furnished or unfurnished. As for offering an entire property or single rooms, we at ESPC Lettings don't deal with kind of single rooms, but certainly kind of chatting to colleagues in the industry that do. What I would say at the moment is that more people are looking to rent an entire property, whether that's on their own or with friends or with family, but they're looking to kind of move within a group of people that they know, rather than just renting a share. And I guess that maybe comes with more time being spent at home, possibly working, that you want to be surrounded by people that you're not. So I would say, yeah, it would be kind of an entire property, however many bedrooms that may be, rather than single rooms.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So the next one is for Graham. How should I calculate the amount I'm going to offer on a buy-to-let property?
Thanks, Will. The first thing I probably would say is that buying a buy-to-let property is certainly a medium, but probably a long-term investment. You know, if nothing else, as I alluded to in the first question, the additional dwelling supplement is potentially a significant cost. So you can't buy it today and then sell it tomorrow like you would with stocks and shares, for example. So it is a long-term investment that you're looking to make here. Once you've decided that this is what you want to do, probably you need to think about what your motivation is here. Is it capital growth, or is it you know, the income that will be generated by the rental, or probably a combination of the two? But you know, once you have decided what your investment goals are, then you can maybe direct your search to certain types of properties that might help you achieve those goals. Once you have identified those properties that may be suitable, then it's probably considering the usual things that you would if you were buying a property for yourself. So looking at the condition of the property, first of all, you know, will you have to spend money on it to bring it up to a habitable standard? And you know, being a rental property, there are set guidelines about the standard that the property has to meet for it to be suitable for occupation by tenants. So how much are you going to have to spend? Also, at the moment in the Edinburgh market, there has been an excess demand for properties and a limited supply. So how much competition is there? And you know, because you are buying this as a business, as Nikki mentioned, you are going to be buying this entirely with your head rather than, you know, someone who's buying this for their own home. They may be buying with a combination of head and heart. So trying to figure out what the you know, what budget you are willing to commit to this would be important as well. But it's trying to, you know, view this very much as a business. You know, there will be a price, you know, where the investment doesn't make sense to you anymore because you've spent too much either to buy it or to upgrade it, and then you know, the income yield that you're going to generate may not meet your investment goals. But if alternatively you're thinking you want to buy this and the income will just cover the mortgage, but you're really looking for long-term capital growth, then it may make sense for you. So it's in part depends really what you want to get out of your investment.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next question is for Graham and Nikki. How is a combination of the exodus from the countryside to the countryside, lack of students going to uni, the glut of Airbnbs coming in the market, affecting the Edinburgh market? So this was an amalgamation of lots of questions. There are lots of people asking about these factors. So it'd be good if you could, shed some light on, or as best you can on these, on that question.
Yeah, sure. I can just jump in and then I can pass on to Graham. Realistically, haven't seen much of an impact by any of those things. Actually, people started to move away from kind of the Airbnb model and the short-term lets, probably from as early as just after summer 2019. So we started to see people move away from that, come to us, want a long-term tenant. So it's been going on for quite some time and has continued to do so. So really it's been kind of a steady flow of those kind of properties into the market rather than a knee-jerk reaction to everything that's going on and all of a sudden the market is flooded with them. So that has been a steady flow, and that really within the marketplace. Students certainly differently this year. Obviously, what we would normally find is that students get their accommodation sorted before heading home for the summer. Definitely did not happen this year, with the uncertainty whether they were going to be returning to uni and whether things were just going to be done remotely. They needed to set things up before they left for the summer. What we did see in September was an influx of tenants arriving into the city. Students, domestic and international students, arrived in tons in September, and it was the busiest month that ESPC Lettings has ever seen with the influx of students. So if you think you would have had all of those that maybe would have sorted themselves out before or during the summer and the September arrivals, everybody needed to at the same time. So there was certainly a lot of students arriving. How that might change in the new year, we don't know, but certainly thus far, there's been plenty of movements and tenants arriving. The exodus to the country, I've not really seen. We have people serving notice and moving out of their rental properties, but they have been for various reasons, whether that's a change in job, or buy property, or moving to be closer to family. There's all sorts of reasons, and those are the same reasons that have been given for this for years. So there's not really been any change of that, and we've certainly not seen a glut of vacant properties in the city centre as everybody is up and down. So largely, maybe what thing people are a little bit of afraid of has actually really not impacted the rental market, or certainly not yet.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And Graham?
Yeah, no, I would probably echo what Nikki said in that, that may have seemed, the natural thing that would begin to happen. But, as I alluded to earlier, there is still a shortage of properties for people to buy, if they're looking for their own home. And even, if people have been living, young professionals, for example, have been living in shared accommodation with 2 or 3 other people. If they're now working from home, they may think, they actually need their own home. So even if there have been properties coming to the market that were formerly rented, then they will be being snapped up by people to occupy them as owner occupiers. So from that point of view, it's not really had an impact at the moment. So we are, it's business as usual really, but perhaps if this does happen later in the later next year, for example, then it may present an opportunity for buy-to-let investors if there is a downturn in prices, but at the moment that's not happening.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So next question's for Graham as well. So what are the pros and cons of buying a buy-to-let property through a company as opposed to as an individual?
Again, this is largely a sort of tax consideration, really. Most buy-to-let investors are probably someone who will be, as an individual, a higher rate taxpayer. So the attraction of buying investment properties in the name of a company is that the rates of corporation tax are generally lower. So the income, i.e. rental generated by the rental property, will be taxed at a lower rate. The thing that most people then have to consider is, the income that is being generated by the property, what do you do with it? Because if you then withdraw money from the company, there may well be, tax that requires to be paid on that. So you know, you really would need to speak to an accountant or a specialist tax advisor to determine whether or not this would actually make sense for you. One of the benefits, however, of buying in the name of a company is that if you build up a portfolio of, you know, half a dozen properties, say, rather than selling them off to individually to random buyers, you can sell your property company, and that may allow the buyer of the property company to pay stamp duty on the purchase of the shares in the company, rather than paying additional dwelling supplement on the individual properties if they are buying it as a buy to let, for example. So it could be attractive to a potential buyer to do it that way. But in the short term, you know, as I say, this is really a question about whether it is sensible for you to buy in the name of a company, just simply to avoid that situation, you know, of paying more tax than you otherwise would want to.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And the last question we've got from the pre-submitted questions, I think it's kind of tied to the, should you have is it good to have an agency manage your property? Is it a bad idea to lease far away from your home base? That one's for Nikki.
Thanks. I guess it comes down a lot to personal preference, and whether you're planning on managing it yourself or using an agent. Certainly, in recent months, I've worked with clients in Spain, France, Italy, who have all purchased buy-to-let properties remotely, and I have then collected keys from them for the solicitors, checked the properties, got it to the market. So it's entirely possible. If you are wanting to manage the property yourself, then you might want to be, in case anything goes wrong. But if you are happy to use an agent, the vast majority of our landlords certainly don't live close by. So yeah, it comes down to personal preference, but it really isn't necessary. Everything that is electronically these days, everything is done via email, Zoom. We don't always need to meet in person. So yeah, things come remotely, so it's entirely possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to the live Q&A now. So I'm going to, so just for the panelists, if there's a question that I had to put to you and you think actually that'd be better for someone else, just let me know and we can switch it around. But the first one is typically how long are you seeing the purchase process take from start of mortgage application to completion of missives? So I think Graham maybe be able to shed some light on that. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I think this is, possibly a question that Peter will be able to assist me with in terms of how long a mortgage application typically is taking. But generally speaking, it does appear to me as if mortgage applications are taking a little bit longer at the moment, in part because, banks have staff working from home as well, and things are just a little bit more clunky perhaps in terms of processes, so mortgage applications are generally taking a little bit longer. Normally we would suggest that if you submit an offer to buy a property, you make it conditional upon that mortgage funding or that offer of mortgage funding being made available, and then also giving yourself a little bit of time thereafter to make practical arrangements for, if you need to carry out work to the property to upgrade it, you can organize your tradespeople to come in to the property and what have you. So it's probably 8 weeks or something like that would give enough time for mortgage application and all the legal process to be completed, with a little bit of margin for error on the end there as well.
Yeah, I'd probably go along with that. Mortgage offers depends on the lender, depends on the applicants, to be honest with you, because we need to get all the documentation in. So if the applicant gives you everything you need up front, we submit that to the lender. Graham's right, there are a number of lenders with their staff spread all over the country working from home, and that invariably does slow things down. Surveyors getting access, all the COVID-related issues, just generally slowing the process down overall. Not too bad though with buy-to-let mortgage applications, to be fair, as opposed to the sort of more general mortgage market. But yeah, a few few extra weeks more than normal for the whole process, I would concur with that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'll kind of just leave this one to you guys who wants to answer it. Buy-to-let residential or Airbnb/holiday let, which is a better investment opportunity? So if you want to take that one, or if anyone's going to.
Well, I guess it depends on what your situation is, and if you're looking for a short-term kind of income, or if you're really looking for something more long-term. If you're looking for a long-term investment, kind of a long tend to work best, you should get some rental income, which should kind of see you through in the short term. But really the idea of that is that you capital within the property, and that it is a long-term investment. I do with lots of people that essentially is their retirement plan these days. So that's what people are looking for. The Airbnb is can be up and down. It's a much more difficult to forecast income. There are peaks and troughs throughout the year, whereas a long-term let, you can kind of know how much you're going to get and kind of make plans. For the Airbnb, as I say, there are peaks and troughs and highs and lows. So you would just need to kind of manage your income slightly differently. So it's maybe depending on what you're wanting to get out of things in the short and long term, I would say.
Could I just add to that as well, that from a lending point of view, the market for Airbnb mortgages is very, very restricted. Okay. Very few lenders have an appetite for Airbnb mortgages.
No, that's good. Yeah. Thank you very much. I
agree. And I would also just add as well that the Edinburgh Council and indeed others throughout Scotland are probably going to be tightening up on the amount of time properties can be offered as Airbnbs throughout the year, just to preserve the amenity of neighbouring proprietors. They don't want to necessarily be living constantly next door to stag do's and hen do's, and that's all the negative stuff that people tend to hear about Airbnb. But I think that there will be more restriction coming in as well. So yeah, I think, as Nikki said, short term there can be real peaks in terms of income, but whether that is a sensible investment model, it's difficult to generalize.
Perfect. Well, thank you. That was all really good answers. So the next question, I think, will be for Graham, but stop me if I'm wrong. We own a property just now with under my wife and my name. Should we buy buy-to-let on my name or my wife's, or both? So basically,
I suppose again, there could be well, first of all, purchasing the property, you will still have to pay additional dwelling supplement, even if, for example, the current home were just to be owned in one person's name. If you bought the investment property in the other spouse's name, spouses are regarded as one economic unit in terms of calculating whether additional dwelling supplement would be due. So the spouse who doesn't own a property but is buying the buy-to-let property would have to pay additional dwelling supplement. I suppose the decision may well be more sort of longer term in terms of if one spouse is a higher rate taxpayer and the other spouse is a lower rate taxpayer, then you may see an advantage in taking title to the investment property in the name of the lower tax rate payer. But Peter may say, well, that's all well and good, but if the lower rate taxpayer doesn't have sufficient income to justify the buy-to-let mortgage, then there could be that could be an issue. But I think sometimes it's difficult to give a concrete yes or no answer, and as I say, it's probably a typical lawyer type answer, but it might in different circumstances make sense to structure the investments in the name of one spouse or the other. But hopefully that's given some things to think about.
I think to be fair to you, Graham, though, it's very difficult, just with a broad generic question, because everyone's circumstances are entirely different. If Mr. Potential Buy-to-Let is a higher rate taxpayer and Mrs. Potential Buy-to-Let is a homemaker, or vice versa, that absolutely affects the decision, affects the recommendations. So one size never fits all with any mortgage. My advice, as ever, speak to a broker.
Absolutely. And you'd be more than happy to help with that, those kind of questions. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so next one actually is for Peter. What are you seeing in terms of availability and type of buy-to-let loans on the market? Has the offerings changed during the pandemic?
No. That's it. It's very straightforward. Not in buy-to-let mortgages, because buy-to-let mortgages requiring a 25% deposit, so the loan to value is already 75% and or below. I genuinely haven't seen any change. The rates are still very good. The products are still there. Lenders are still willing to lend, and there's still a healthy appetite for mortgage lending and for buying buy-to-let properties. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And next one's to you as well, actually. Do you need a buy-to-let mortgage if you're planning to be a live-in landlord?
So buy a live-in landlord, that's not actually going to be a buy-to-let mortgage. It's not going to be a buy-to-let property either. I can only assume that you're thinking of renting a room, which would be a regular domestic mortgage, but you would need to be checking the lender's criteria to see if they were happy with the rent-a-room scheme. Rent-a-room scheme is a scheme offered by the HMRC and the government. It lets you allows you to rent out a room in your home for up to, I think it's £7,500 a year, tax free. But that's rent-a-room scheme as opposed to a buy-to-let. So two separate things there. That's pretty much it on that one, I think.
No, that's fine. I think Nikki maybe did mention some stats at the start. I've had a question about one-bedroom flats. Are they typically going for over a market value at the moment? If you do want to see the stats, we do have we have a house price report that comes out every month. I'm not going to put my neck out right now because I can't quite remember what the stats were on the one-bedroom properties. But yeah, if you follow us on any of our social medias, or if you have our newsletter, whenever we do release a house price report, it's really, really good data. It will tell you a lot of kind of what's happening in the market. Like the headline figure from the last report was that in the borders, the prices had risen by 20%, which was, a huge jump. And I think that's where probably a lot of people's speculation that people were moving to the countryside came from. So yeah, for that one there, just have a look at our lovely report that's been produced for you. Next one is, where would you buy a one-bedroom in Edinburgh if you're given the funds? Buy one in Stockbridge? No, I'm assuming this is for yields. Nikki, if you could chime in with that one there.
Yeah, I mean, people often ask me, if you had the money, where would you buy? And you really need to kind of back what you're wanting to get out of it. I obviously mentioned some of the areas that are offering really good yields at the moment, but you might want to plump for another area because it's an area that you know and that you're more comfortable with. So in terms of kind of what's the best area, as I say, I mentioned kind of those areas which were just purely offering the best kind of yield. In terms of places that are popular with tenants, because the places that are popular with tenants don't always offer the best yield, but you might have occupancy level. So the areas that are always popular with tenants which rent super well and these will be the likes of Leith and the Shore is always popular and getting even more so. If you can put up with the tram work in the meantime, we'll wait. Other areas which are popular, I would say, are kind of Fountain Bridge, Polworth, around that kind of area. It's really close to the city centre. You've got the canal, you've got green spaces, you've got lots going on there. So that's certainly becoming more popular. And then kind of areas like South Gyle. There are a lot of people based kind of at the city, and we find that's particularly popular with kind of young couples, young families, maybe looking for houses in that kind of area. So those are ones that are popular with tenants, but will also give you a good yield too.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think the last question here, I think we may have answered. Does a limited company pay additional dwellings tax or only LBTT? I think, Graham, you did mention that earlier.
Yes, this one is a yes/no answer. You'll be pleased to
Okay.
hear. Yes, a company will pay additional dwelling supplement and the standard LBTT. I think the reason for that would be that even though it's called additional dwelling supplement, if you created Graham Keith Property Company #1 and buy one property and then create Graham Keith Property Company #2 and then that company buys one property, you could keep creating new companies without any one of those companies owning more than one property. So I think they've just created a rule that if you buy in the name of a company, it will pay additional dwelling supplement regardless of how many properties the company owns, but you do as well have to pay the standard rate of land and buildings transaction tax.
Perfect. That's excellent. So that's all the questions answered, and we're actually bang on time, which is the first. So I'd just like to thank Graham, Peter, and Nikki. You guys were fantastic. I think there was lots of good questions and a lot of good answers. If you are wanting to rewatch this, we open it up on YouTube and we share it on our Facebook and LinkedIn, etc. But no, thanks again, guys, and thank you for attending. And I hope you all have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.